The Conjuring: Last Rites was truly a box office-breaking finale for Ed and Lorraine Warren's journey as they battled against some of the most insidious demonic entities to ever invade the possession horrors subgenre. Not only that, the last hurrah of the fictionalized version of the real-world paranormal investigators was actually based on a real-life horror case, which means newer demons and spirits have been added to the franchise's roster of doom. So far, The Conjuring has spawned a movie franchise filled with creative villains and terrifying evil spirits that keep things feeling fresh with each installment, forcing the heroes to defeat these demons in new and creative ways. Since 2013, James Wan's horror universe has continued to expand with sequels, prequels, and spin-offs that might take place in the same continuity but are often completely separate from one another. However, one of the few aspects that often crosses over between movies are the iconic ghosts who are incredibly important in the Conjuring universe. It goes without saying that the entities that the Warrens dealt with are as diverse as they are terrifying. The Conjuring universe, as you might know, covers an entire spectrum of specters, ranging from nightmarish demons sent straight from hell to formerly human spirits whose actions are governed by otherworldly entities. So we decided to take a trip down memory lane to look back at every demonic entity and ghost, ranging from Annabelle to Valak, that we've seen in the Conjuring universe so far. So, without wasting another moment, let's rank each of the different demons and demon-controlled entities to discover which is truly the scariest. Oh, and before we get too far ahead of ourselves, we do have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to the channel. It's a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Valak, aka the Demon Nun. Honestly, bad bitch Valak is always going to top the Conjuring list for scariest entities. Ever since stealing the show as the secret villain in The Conjuring 2 after being introduced in the iconic Amityville house and eventually making its presence known in the finale, the demon Valak has become no less than a bit of a horror superstar. The demon's initial appearance was so scary and intense that she managed to secure her own spin-off movie with The Nun. While her movie wasn't as successful as anticipated, it's still one of the most frightening entries in the Conjuring universe. The fact that she rarely makes any noise and simply looms in the shadows is exactly what makes her such a great villain, even if she lacked the depth to really shine in her solo projects. Oh, and Valak is actually a male demon who takes on the form of the Nun to plague the Warren family with a stoic presence, soul-piercing stare, and all-around evil intensity, which means Valak is kind of a drag sensation? With the costume and makeup departments not overdoing the look, Aaron's magnificent work, and on a subtextual level, the idea of Valak's defilement of religious purity and his presence itself instantly dominates any scene. As a purely diabolical villain, Valak wants nothing more than to cause pain, which taps into the kind of primordial human fear that made movies like The Exorcist hit with audiences. With his piercing, beady eyes that seem to follow you everywhere, Valak was a true demon, and one that appears in the real world's greater demonology myths. In fact, this demon was powerful enough to only answer to Satan himself, and the yellow-eyed creature that tormented the Hodgsons certainly looked worthy of that level of esteem. We remember that people simply wouldn't stop talking about Valak in 2016, and that's why a spin-off movie was greenlit. Valak's background is explored in more depth in both the Nun movies, which are part of the greater Conjuring connected universe. The demon basically chose the form of a nun as a method of mocking the church and the faith of those who would combat it, like Lorraine Warren. Surprisingly, Valak could block Lorraine's vision, which made it even more difficult to stop. The expanded Conjuring universe lore even points to Valak as the entity ultimately responsible for the demon Malthus jumping into the Annabelle doll. Even if the mirror demon of The Conjuring: Last Rites is treated as the de facto final boss of the series, it's Valak who's the real big bad of the franchise. But we think Wan used the entity more effectively in The Conjuring 2 than Corin Hardy did in The Nun. However, that didn't stop audiences from making the latter a monster hit, because not only could he hide from Lorraine's vision, he also controlled other spirits, which inevitably makes Valak the scariest demonic entity in the Conjuring universe. Malthus. After Valak, Malthus is undoubtedly the scariest demon to plague the Conjuring universe. Also known as Halphus, Malthus was the malevolent entity that latched onto a porcelain doll known as Annabelle and used it as a conduit to torment those who owned it. First seen in the movie Annabelle, after a satanic cult invades the home of John Form and his then pregnant wife Mia, the Annabelle doll that John gave Mia as a gift becomes a conduit for the demon. Since then, the demon continued to torment Mia and her daughter Leah. Towards the end of the film, Malthus kidnapped Leah and offered to give Leah back in exchange for Mia's soul. So, without any other solution left at her disposal, Mia attempts to give the demon her soul, but John arrives in the nick of time to stop her. Again, when she insists on giving her soul to the demon, Evelyn steps in to take Mia's place by committing suicide to give Malthus her soul, after which Leah is returned. Malthus is a very sadistic, persistent, aggressive, and terrifying demon who is pure evil and absent of any kind of mercy or remorse. He often toyed with his victims before attempting to kill them by taking their souls, and is possibly the most demon-looking entity in the franchise. He's a black ram-like humanoid demon with white and sometimes yellow or green eyes. In Annabelle 2014 and Annabelle Creation, Malthus appears to have 4 horns, and the horns that appear near his forehead resemble goat horns, while his other 2 curved horns look a lot like the horns of a ram. This demon has sharp teeth, yellow sharp claws on his hands and feet, and a body that resembles a humanoid. He also has a black goatee on his chin and black hair in between his goat-like horns. Malthus is also a shapeshifter who's able to take on any form, such as Annabelle B. Mullins, Annabelle Janice Higgins, or a black shadowy mass to move around more efficiently. He can choose to be visible or invisible to humans and travel to different places in his shadowy mass of black smoke form, which helps the demon to be in different places at once, such as possessing someone or tormenting a victim, as shown in Annabelle Creation. However, in Annabelle Comes Home, Malthus looks a bit different compared to his previous appearances. In this film, his 2 goat-like horns on his forehead were gone, and his ram-like horns were seen to be much bigger than before. His goatee and hair were also gone, and this time his eyes were green. Malthus could also move very swiftly in order to attack his victims at high speed. It's also said that Malthus had presumably gotten stronger and changed his form as a result of feeding on Evelyn's soul after she sacrificed herself. Whatever the case may be, we would never want to face a demon as insidious as Malthus.
I don't know where she got it, but we are beyond.
Annabelle! Imagine a doll so iconic that she got a trilogy before the Warrens did. It goes without saying, but the Annabelle doll's plastered smile, worn face, and tattered clothes have been burned into our collective psyches since 2013. The haunted doll is both the titular focus and the terrifying villain of 2014's Annabelle, which was the first of many spin-offs in the Conjuring universe. She first appeared very briefly in the background of a scene in The Conjuring, but it wasn't until Annabelle that she finally came into her own and fulfilled her potential as an iconic villain. It's definitely the practical effects and the lack of overt CGI that makes Annabelle such a menacing character, as she truly feels like something drawn from real life. Based on a real-life doll from the Warren case files, Annabelle was possessed by a demonic spirit in the movie, which allowed her to become a recurring threat in the franchise. Only by locking it away in their basement have the Warrens been able to keep her at bay. But as Annabelle Comes Home quickly proved, even that's not a foolproof strategy, as it can still try to influence people from afar in order to attain its freedom. In fact, we see a rather ginormous version of the doll chasing Judy Warren in the latest Conjuring film, which was truly terrifying. Having said that though, on its own, the doll isn't really too terrifying because, scary face or not, you can always just chuck that thing in the closet with a box of unloved Funkos. But what really makes Annabelle stand out on the roster of doom is the way that she acts as a conduit for Malthus, who, as we just discussed, is a far more malevolent demon with a horned head, red eyes, long fingernails, and pitch black leathery skin. Whether he's lingering in the shadows or comes in his full monstrous view, this demon, coupled with the Annabelle doll's off-putting presence, is more than enough to make you shit your pants with an incredibly long list of horrifying scenarios. The Mirror Demon from The Conjuring Last Rites. So, the entity responsible for the evil that besets the Smurl and Warren families in The Conjuring Last Rites never fully reveals itself, but we do get one brief look at it when it appears in the corner of Lorraine Warren's delivery room, only showing a pale body, long fingers, and small glowing eyes, and later, briefly in the Smurl house. In fact, this demon entity is so powerful that it managed to latch itself onto Lorraine and her unborn child through only a brief touch. When Lorraine touched the mirror glass, she directly went into labor as the demon was trying to claim her child. But after it failed, the mirror demon hunted down the Warrens and pretty much set a trap to lure them in 22 years later. It had always wanted Judy, and so it influenced Father Gordon to take his own life and then used his death to draw Judy towards it. The mirror demon also presented itself as Judy Warren's reflection in the wedding dress shop and does manage to effectively possess her body in the movie's climax. However, what makes the mirror demon truly terrifying is its incredible power, as it manages to manipulate reality on a level that was previously unseen in the Conjuring movies. I mean, at one point, we see the mirror getting absolutely shattered to pieces, only to recreate its cursed form back and magically place itself in the Smurl attic. We think that what keeps the mirror demon at the 4th rank of this list and away from the top is the fact that it never gets a big visual payoff, which we honestly believe is a huge missed potential given that it was the last run of the Warrens. We don't ever get a full view of the demon, as it instead manifests in the form of the cursed mirror, which attacks the Warren family in the Smurl household, injuring Judy's fiancé Tony and nearly killing Ed by weakening his heart. Even if that is scary in concept, it was severely lacking in appearance. The Crooked Man. When The Crooked Man first appeared in The Conjuring 2, we immediately knew that this franchise wasn't going to slow down anytime soon. The Conjuring 2 did a banger job at featuring an impressive slate of new creepies, and The Crooked Man felt ripped straight from the pages of a nightmarish fable. Drawn from a real, unsettling nursery rhyme and linked to an equally unsettling wind-up toy, The Crooked Man is a massive, gangly demon monster who looks like Jack Skellington in The Babadook, had one too many drinks one night, and 9 months later had to live with the consequences. Created from a creepy toy and used to scare the children in the movie, he was arguably one of the scariest villains up until that point, with his twisted smile and haunting laughter being used throughout the film to create some serious tension in the narrative. Unlike Bill Wilkins, who was just a pawn of the demon plaguing the Hodgsons in The Conjuring 2, the Crooked Man was actually an alternate manifestation of the demon itself. Presenting as a grotesquely long-limbed wraith wearing a purple suit and a hat over a pale smile lined with razor-sharp teeth, the Crooked Man emerged from the Hodgson boys' homemade tent in what was one of the franchise's best reveals and jump scares. Even then, the Crooked Man was all about presence and appearance, as he doesn't actively torment the Hodgsons beyond his spine-chilling arrival. In fact, as an alternative form of the demon in their home, the Crooked Man visage appears to be an almost playful way for the demon to revel in torturing the Hodgsons, using it to stoke the fear that it feeds on. This demonic creature was actually supposed to be getting a solo project, but the Crooked Man spin-off movie was cancelled, so he's yet to appear since then.
Mom!
Llorona. The Curse of Llorona was quite an interesting example of the Conjuring universe diverting strongly from the established characters of the franchise and trying something completely new. While it didn't work perfectly, the character of Llorona had plenty of untapped potential, which was exciting proof back in the day that this franchise had plenty of steam left. While the movie she is attached to is a dreary miss, the tragic, ghostly figure of Llorona is appropriately the best thing about The Curse of Llorona. Based on the Latin American folklore about the weeping woman, the movie depicts her as a violent entity who attaches a curse onto children and proceeds to drown them just as she did her own children 300 years earlier. The movie, ironically, takes a pretty shallow approach to her lore, but Llorona is still one of the few Conjuring villains on this list with a human background, which goes on to motivate her vicious afterlife. She truly was unrelenting, and director Michael Chavez earned some credit for giving her a bit of stature, centering all the terror on her ghastly presence and unnerving weeping. Often cloaked in shadow and coming off as gentle and even vulnerable before lashing out, there was a distinctive yet nerve-dwindling vibe to her that, if involved in a better movie, could have made for a complex and even more terrifying villain. Although The Curse of Llorona is not technically a Conjuring movie, it was originally intended to be and shares many similarities with the rest of the franchise. However, this also means that it's highly unlikely Llorona will return in any future installments, especially after so many years. The Bride. Well, it might be easy to forget, 2019 gave us not one, but two homicidal film dresses, with the stylish yet dangerous red dress from In Fabric and the unassuming wedding dress from Annabelle Comes Home. One of the creepier moments from that film basically comes from an evil spirit that possessed a bridal dress. This piece of elegant fabric came with a cost beyond the steep price tag, as it was possessed by a spirit that forced the unlucky bride to murder the man she was about to marry. In Annabelle Comes Home, the bride manifests as a ghost carrying a butcher knife covered in the blood of 7 unlucky grooms. Even if it was in no position to commit such a murder in Annabelle Comes Home, this evil spirit was unleashed upon the kids in the film when Annabelle was accidentally set free. While her big scare is a bit too reminiscent of a nun sequence in The Conjuring 2, there is something classically terrifying about a ghostly bride out for blood, and with the dress itself as the true harbinger of evil. At some point, this ominous dress was acquired by the Warrens and placed in the basement along with their other haunted artifacts. The Ferryman. Amidst the countless horror cameos and brief appearances in Annabelle Comes Home, the Ferryman is undoubtedly the spirit who's given the most backstory and development throughout the movie. Inspired in part by the mythological psychopomp named Charon, the Ferryman of the Conjuring universe looks about as ghoulish as you'd expect the skeletal guy thing who ferries the dead across the river Styx to look. Like a mummy without its wrapping and sporting 2 shiny coins on his or its eyes, this unsettling baddie added an extra layer of fantastical horror to Annabelle Comes Home, as Mary Ellen goes into a sort of evil side realm to retrieve Annabelle by walking past several dead folks with coins on their eyes as the Ferryman follows her in the dark. Here too, he's the creature that transports the dead to the underworld, much like many similar characters in ancient mythologies. Annabelle Comes Home gives him a terrifying design that blends perfectly with his creepy personality and threatening tone, making him a great villain that really elevates the story. And with most of the movies taking a more grounded approach to demons and overall evilness, the Ferryman's concept was a refreshing change of pace into something more darkly ethereal. The Goat Demon. The Nun 2 had introduced another exciting spirit to the Conjuring universe in the form of the Goat Demon, who was responsible for bringing about many of the scariest moments in the movie. Plus, the film also gave this Goat Demon its own backstory, which really helped to develop the story and make him feel like an important part of the universe. Well, this was clearly a choice to act on the criticism that Annabelle Comes Home faced for including too many forgettable villains. The Goat Demon was undoubtedly one of the scarier Conjuring universe characters. Early on in The Nun 2, we see a group of bullies force a girl named Sophie into the boarding school's abandoned chapel, putting her face to face with the unsettling window mosaic. According to playground lore, looking away from the goat pictured in the mosaic will apparently bring the creature to life. To make matters more unsettling, an arrow of sunlight shines through the mosaic, lighting up the goat's red eyes. This creepy moment wasn't just scary, it also echoed with Valak's painting in The Conjuring 2. Later in the film, Sophie shows it to her mother, and after Deborah lights the mosaic goat's eyes with a flashlight, the group is able to locate a relic belonging to the Nun 2's St. Lucy. However, in the same way Valak wasn't contained to Lorraine Warren's canvas, the Goat Demon vanishes from the mosaic to manifest in the real world and terrorize the school. Taking the form of a goat man, the creature is thought to be an incarnation of the devil, though the film never outright confirms the theory. The Axeman. So in The Conjuring Last Rites, the spirit that lurks in the basement of the Smurl family home sadly received very little screen time, but that definitely didn't prevent him from making his mark as one of the scariest entities in the Conjuring series. Even though his spirit was raised from the dead and controlled by the mirror demon to terrify the Smurl family, this man was responsible for the deaths of his wife and mother-in-law. As it turns out, the Smurl house was actually constructed on what used to be a massive farm property. One day, a man found out that his wife was having an affair and lost his mind in rage. He searched for his wife everywhere, only to find her hiding in the basement with her mother, and then, out of blind fury, he killed them both with an axe. This same giddy rage and violence drips out of the character even after he's being controlled by the mirror demon. But what makes the Axeman so scary is the ghastly smile that marks his features as he wields his axe and lantern. His massive stature certainly helps him appear even more intimidating as he lunges at Heather Smurl or reenacts the murder of his unfaithful wife in front of Lorraine Warren. It's truly a shame that he didn't have a deeper connection with the mirror demon, because there was plenty of potential around that.
Bathsheba!
Bathsheba Sherman. Bathsheba Sherman is more demon-adjacent than actual demon, as she's the manifestation of the spirit of a satanic witch who committed suicide on the grounds of the Perrin family home. Born in 1812, Bathsheba was a witch and a fanatical worshiper of Satan, but 51 years later, in 1863, when Bathsheba married a rich farmer named Judson Sherman, she gave birth to a baby, and when her baby was a week old, Judson caught her sacrificing it in front of a fireplace. In response, Bathsheba ran out to a tree nearby a dock, climbed to the top of it, proclaimed her love for Satan, and cursed anyone who tried to take her land before hanging herself. Ever since, Bathsheba's evil spirit continued to reside on the land, haunting her former homestead. True to her curse, Bathsheba would haunt the families that would move into her house by possessing the mother to kill the children before forcing them to commit suicide. Of course, when the parents reached out to the Warrens, they came in and took care of her by banishing Bathsheba out of the house and condemning her to hell. Honestly, she's no less frightening than any demon the Warrens encountered, and she boasts one of the most blood-curdling appearances of any entity in the Conjuring movies. Bathsheba's first major appearance atop the armoire is one of, if not the best OG scare in the entire Conjuring universe. Her sheer power and evil in possessing Carolyn Perrin is unmatched, and yes, there may be more powerful entities, but nothing is as deeply disturbing as her conquest of Carolyn. In fact, we'll go out on a limb and say that's what made The Conjuring such a phenomenon, and in reality, spawned the entire Conjuring universe. The Unknown Laughing Demon. Inspired by the real-life criminal case of Arne Cheyenne Johnson, The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, saw the Warrens go head-to-head with a murderous demon whose exact name was never mentioned, which is why it appears so low on this list. While we never actually see the entity known by Conjuring fans as the Laughing Demon, it does appear right away in The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, as the primary target of the exorcist that Ed and Lorraine were assisting. The Laughing Demon took control of a young boy named David Gladstone and was responsible for his stomach-churning contortion and maniacal laugh, hence the name. It's this same demon that continues to jump into the victims of Kastner, known as the occultist, when they are marked with a witch totem. It victimizes David before jumping into Arne, who sacrifices himself to save David and ends up becoming the next host of the demon, who had originally been summoned by an evil group of devil worshippers called the Cult of the Ram. In fact, this demon also took over Ed Warren himself, which is definitely not an easy feat. The Laughing Demon's conjuring was intentional on the part of the occultist and a result of her attempting to complete a dark power ritual involving murder-suicide. Unfortunately, the demon finally collects the soul it craves at the end of the movie when it kills Kastner as compensation for her not being able to complete the ritual. Honestly, the image of David Glatzel bent like a pretzel is one of the movie's most memorable and shocking images, to be sure, but since we never see this demon in a form outside of its victims, it's simply just not as scary as the others. Bill Wilkins. Nobody wants a crotchety old Englishman yelling at them while they're alive, so The Conjuring 2's vengeful, angry, demonic version is pure nightmare fuel. The film focused on the real-world haunting of the Hodgson family by what is now labeled as the Enfield poltergeist, which manifests in several forms in the movie. While the real Enfield haunting has largely been recognized as a hoax, the hauntings in the movie are among the most terrifying in the series. As you know, The Conjuring 2 introduced several new characters that immediately left an impression on fans, and Bill Wilkins is certainly one of those. He was the former tenant of the building that the Hodgsons moved into and goes on to torment the two Hodgson daughters. He's responsible for several high-quality jump scares, but it's soon revealed that the spirit of Bill is being used by a much darker and more dangerous entity to torment the Hodgsons. This old man terrorized the Hodgsons family, hoping to force them from what he still believed to be his property. The look of Wilkins, with decaying flesh and teeth beneath yellow eyes, added a healthy dose of terror to his visual jump scares. But what makes his unseen presence so haunting is the way director James Wan makes the house feel cold, uninviting, and cursed by Wilkins' very presence. Wan also understands that there's something inherently unnerving about old furniture, as if it's been touched by something that doesn't want to let go. With Wilkins, that was his beat-up leather chair sitting ominously in the corner, which became the focal point for some of the movie's scariest sequences. We know Old Man Wilkins' human appearance is unlike many of the other demons, but that actually gives him an uncanny feeling which is just as frightening. He might not look as threatening as the other villains, but unlike the other violent ghosts in the franchise, Bill allowed himself to become a pawn of Valak. Even if this old man was a fairly scary ghoul in his own right, he's still low on the list because there wasn't anything legitimately evil about him. In fact, Bill was almost as much a victim as the Hodgsons, as his spirit was being controlled by a legitimate demon. The succubus. Well, not exactly the succubus, but the succubus-like wild spirit from the Conjuring Last Rites was least seen of all. In fact, this seemingly human spirit of a younger woman was actually discerned by Lorraine Warren as one of 3 human spirits that haunted the Smurl family home, all 3 of which met horrific endings as the young woman was axe-murdered by her rage-filled husband for having an extramarital affair. Controlled by the mirror demon, the young woman was responsible for finally convincing Jack Smurl, the family patriarch, of the legitimacy of the supernatural occurrences as she appeared to him while he was laying in his bed. She paralyzed his body, suspended him in midair, and proceeded to sexually assault him by crawling on top. This incident is based on the real Jack Smurl's claims that he was assaulted by a succubus or a female demon who seduces men. We don't see much of the woman during the movie, and while her assault on Jack Smurl is certainly intense, the spirit herself isn't all that scary. Plus, the only other major moment she had was in the basement with Lorraine, who she warns off before reliving her own axe murder at the hands of her ghoulish husband. The old woman. As we previously discussed, the mother of the wild young woman murdered by her husband in The Conjuring Last Rites was also murdered in his rage-driven rampage, and after being controlled by the mirror demon, she manifests as a ghostly old woman to members of the Smurl family and to Judy Warren. Her grotesquely large smile and pale visage is certainly frightening, and the way she uses a baby doll of the Smurl twins provides one of the movie's best jump scares. However, because she is a human spirit being manipulated by a greater evil, she's not all that terrifying on her own. In fact, she never does anything to actively torment or possess the Smurls or Warrens, although she does bother Judy quite a bit when she's trying on wedding dresses by grabbing her from beneath and scaring the shit out of her. Not only that, she also almost kills Judy's fiancé, Tony Spera, by appearing in the middle of the road and driving him to crash his car. Even then, she's probably the least scary bit of the film, let alone the entire franchise. The Toy Monkey. While we agree that the demons and ghosts definitely steal the spotlight, even then, it would be a bold-faced lie for us to say that these humanoid specters alone have given us nightmares over the years. To talk about the absolute scariest of the Conjuring franchise, we also have to address the trinkets and toys that have made their way into the Warrens' secret room. Among these is the accordion monkey that a journalist was warned not to touch, despite its cuteness. In another brief appearance from Annabelle Comes Home, the accordion-playing monkey is considerably more evil than it appears, as it's another inanimate object brought to life by some kind of evil spirit, but the cracked facade of the toy really makes it frightening even before it's activated. The sudden noise of the accordion also enables plenty of effective jump scares, which is exactly what Annabelle Comes Home became notorious for. Feely Mealy. Feely Mealy is one of the more creative spirits in the Conjuring universe, as it took the form of a haunted children's board game. This horrifying game required its players to stick their hands into holes on the sides without having any idea of what they would be touching. The Annabelle movies often used inanimate objects, like the titular doll, and transformed them into something inconceivably frightening. This is exactly what happened with Feely Mealy, because on the surface, it was just an innocent and unremarkable piece of cardboard, but in the context of the story, this supernatural demon really left us with a lasting impression. The Samurai. We think it's the abundance of creative spirits in Annabelle Comes Home which inarguably makes it the best of the Annabelle movies. Most of the demons actually appear for such a short time that they're easy to forget, which is exactly why many of you might not remember the Samurai, a haunted samurai set of armor that speaks to the film's protagonist, Mary Ellen. The haunted suit of samurai armor truly stands out as especially eerie among the many terrifying figures from the Warrens' cupboard of nightmares. It only gets worse when the ghostly samurai armor makes its presence known with ghostly echoes of violence emitting from its body or mouth, maybe? Honestly, we don't know how it talks, but that voice is definitely coming out of somewhere, and that's kinda horrifying. The Black Shuck. The Black Shuck is another creature that only appears briefly in Annabelle Comes Home. This demonic creature takes the form of a large dog and seems to have the ability to turn itself into a fog. While the exact rules of this creature weren't made quite clear, it was a perfect example of the Annabelle movie's aptitude for dark and violent imagery. Many of the spirits in this movie had a similar quality and relied heavily on their uncanny appearances to work their way into all of our minds. The Haunted Piano. Perhaps the biggest gift this franchise has given us has been various filmmakers challenging themselves to make everyday items as terrifying as a demonic entity. The Haunted Piano, for example, is one of many evil spirits introduced in Annabelle Comes Home, and like we previously said, this project really focused on the supernatural side of this universe, bringing in the most villains compared to any other Conjuring movie. We do agree that the Haunted Piano only appears briefly in the film, but the simple design and effortless scare factor definitely made it one of the standout spirits. It was the Warrens' occult museum that houses this haunted piano that Ed Warren would hear playing on its own, but it would immediately stop playing whenever he went to the room to see what was happening. The Warrens allegedly got the piano from the house of a deceased priest, and in real life, the piano music finally stopped when Ed Warren hired a priest to bless the museum every 2 or 3 months. In the film, Judy's babysitter, Daniela, goes into the room at the Warren family house and plays a few keys, despite being warned earlier in the movie not to touch anything in the room. While the piano doesn't play a huge role in the movie, she doesn't listen to those instructions and explores the room full of haunted artifacts, and ultimately that doesn't work out great for her. Unfortunately, that brings us to the end of our video and the end of our ranking of every demonic entity and ghost seen within the entire Conjuring universe. What do you think are the top 5 scariest entities within this franchise? Let us know your thoughts and opinions in the comments section down below, and if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Otherwise, thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and have a marvelous day.